Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hi, I'm Rory and welcome to episode 294 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Our special guest is Ruth Hill. She's a practicing REBT therapist. She has an advanced diploma in CBT and REBT, and she's a gym instructor and personal trainer. So Ruth will be sharing with us how she combines REBT with fitness coaching to help people gain the motivation to stay fit and healthy long term. So with that, let's go on with today's episode.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Yes, a very warm welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, episode 294. Rory and I are absolutely delighted that you're lending us your ears today. 3 stops on the journey, starting with ethical, sustainable practice, where we're going to be speaking about being in a war of certain kinds, because we're on the internet, if we've got our practice and we want people to notice us as practitioners, then we've got to kind of fight our way to the top of Google. And today we're going to be speaking about how you can unlock new counselling clients through blogging, speaking about what you already know and that you are an expert in. We then go into practice matters. And of course, as Rory has already mentioned, we're talking about mindful moves, harnessing the power of rational, emotive, behavioral therapy and exercise. And that was the interview with Ruth Hill, as Rory has mentioned. And then we go on to student services, where we recognize you, the student, on your formal journey to become a counselor, a psychotherapist. So we know that it's uphill sometimes, downhill other times, lots of celebration, lots of times where you kind of hold the head and go, why? Well, that was how it was for me anyway. But today we're going to be speaking about a question that comes up so much from students, and it's how we can recognize where the theory applies to actual practice in the therapy room. I think that's a topic for all, Rory, not just students. But let's start off with that ethical, sustainable practice. We're going to be speaking about the power of blogging. Why would we need a blog in this day and age, Rory? Is blogging not dead? Is it not a thing of the early 2000s?
Well, I think it can find its history there, Ken. I think that people publishing their ideas and writing about what they know that became known as blogging started then. But now it's become a little bit more sophisticated. And I think that also those who are looking for any service or product are probably attracted to blogs, because we now, when we come to buy something, we're now mini researchers. The days of just wandering into, say, a shop and buying something at the behest of the shopkeeper is completely gone now. I don't know anybody who buys anything from food to shoes to any service who doesn't go onto the internet first and start to do a little bit of research. And to be honest, I don't think therapy is any different. I think clients who are looking for support and help may very well start to look at what's going on for them. And first of all, see if they're the only person in the world that's experiencing it. I know from my years of practice that one of the things that is a big relief to clients is that they're not the only people in the world who feel like that. they to find out that actually other people may feel the same thing, certainly in the areas of trauma. Say that, what's happened to you is the human experience is normalized in therapy. You say, well, that's what happens during a traumatic episode.
Yeah.
So I think for clients who are looking to maybe engage a therapist, to find a therapist who's writing about the things that they have gone through from the client's perspective, not from the therapist's perspective, from the client's perspective, is very, very powerful. And if you write in a way that really invites clients to contact you, the reality is that you're going to get more clients phoning you up or emailing you or by whatever method you use to communicate. And they're going to reach out and they're going to say, I've seen your blog. I know that you deal with this and you're talking about what this has happened. This has happened to me. This is how I feel. Can you help me? And at that point, you have the opportunity to have a new client. And it comes down to something that has been known for a long time and really isn't spoken about too loudly in the world of therapy. And that's know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
If you buy any service, you want to know about the product. You need to like the person and like the values of the product's designer or who's selling it to you. And you need to trust that at some level they're going to be honest and what they're offering you is going to be something that may be of help. Know, like, and trust. We do it when we buy our food in the supermarket. I bought a pair of shoes the other day and I did the same thing.
Yep.
And it's no different for therapy, Ken.
Yeah, and I started off by kind of laying out a tripwire, Rory, saying, is this not back from the early 2000s? Because blogging was very big during that time, and there was this jump onto the internet to try and rank your site using blogs. The interesting thing is not a lot has changed. People are still going on the internet, they're still putting in search terms, and they're still receiving search ranking or results from the search engine based on what is seen as authority sites and authority information on the topic. And when you look at those topics that might come up from a Google search, you're going to see most of them are blogs. So they still work. They're still as powerful, if not more so, in this day and age. And what you were speaking about, Rory, was establishing authority. And if you have a specialism within your practice, and we speak about this as niching. Now, remember, this is under the topic of sustainability for your practice. Sustainability, being able to make a living from that we love and from being in service of our clients. We're fighting that war that I mentioned right at the beginning, in that there are probably tens of thousands of other practitioners out there also looking for clients. So when a client is looking, it's thinking about what are they looking for? And they may be looking for a very special niche area where you might have expertise, have done some CPD or some training, and they're going to be typing that into Google. If I'm looking for a therapist to work with because I've just lost somebody, chances are I'm going to be putting in, help grief therapy or getting over grief or something like that. And I'm going to be more drawn to perhaps a therapist who on a page tells me how they specialize in grief and how they work with that grief and what the process is like for working with them with that grief, rather than just a general therapist who might have in a list that they work with grief. So it gives you an opportunity to establish authority. And it doesn't matter where that traffic is coming from. It may be that you're in a directory listing with your ethical body. If the person then clicks on that and has a look at your website, which so many people do, Rory was just mentioning his shoe buying expedition recently. I'm sure that you went online to check out if it's a good brand and what people are saying about it. And the same is true of therapy. If you're choosing a therapist, it's a big decision from a client's perspective. Chances are, even if they see your profile, they might click to learn a little bit more about you. Go and have a look at your website. So you get the opportunity there to establish your authority, who you are, what you do, and how you work with those clients. And that can go a long way in doing exactly what you've said, Rory, is building that know, like, and trust, to have your voice in their head as they're reading through the words that you put out there. And I guess the next thing that we wanted to kind of focus on here is that enhancing visibility. Regularly updating your blogs, Rory, it's going to have an impact on how your website is seen by Google.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And the reality is, it is a very competitive market when you're on the internet, or if you're using any search engine, be it Google or any of the other plethora of search engines that are available. When someone types in a keyword like, trauma counselor Manchester, that would be one. Counselling for trauma Manchester. Who's going to come up? And we know that usually the first three rankings, the first three pages that come up, are going to be the most click through. So if you're at the top three, then almost certainly you're going to get more traffic, more people looking at your website, looking at your offer, potentially reaching out to you than everybody else. And of course, if you're on page 2 of Google, you're probably not going to get very much. And to do that, I think to enhance your search engine optimization, in other words, to make sure that when someone types in a search term, in my case, it was shoe sizing, because I wanted to look at shoe sizing and a particular brand of shoes. What came to the top was actually the shoe company's own website, and that was very, very helpful in understanding how to size my shoes. That was something I was looking for. But in terms of clients, they may be looking at specific therapists who work maybe with diversity. They may be looking for an LGBTQ therapist. They may be looking for someone who works in race and culture, or specific client groups, such as asylum seekers, that type of thing. And it's really important that when someone searches, that they find you and they've got information so they can make a decision whether to take the next step, which is, of course, make contact. And I think part of that process is educating and empowering, Ken. I think that you can share valuable information that helps the people looking at your website understand that you know what they're going through. You understand their feelings, what's going on for them, what could happen, what they're likely to experience, and also how therapy could benefit them. And what you're really doing there is you're empowering people to make informed decisions. You're empowering people to say, that person really gets where I'm at. I need help. I need to help improve my mental or emotional well-being. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to make contact. And there you are. You're paired up, and that process of going through therapy and healing, and trying to get that person trying to kind of move their life along, starts the process of doing that. And it's all through trusting and liking the person that they have seen by their searching.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're speaking about educating and empowering clients by the words that you might have on that web page or on the blog that you put out. And, chances are maybe clients might look at that, or potential clients might look at that and just find comfort in the words on the page enough to not engage with you, but you will be making a difference anyway, just normalizing something that they maybe thought only applies to them and nobody in the world other than me feels this way. And they do a search and they find your blog and they go, oh, okay, hold on, I'm not alone in this. There are other people that have this kind of a presentation as well. There is help available if I should choose to kind of reach out to that. That is greatly of service. And we were speaking about that visibility. I mean, you need to be visible. They need to be able to see your blog, to be able to find it, to be educated, and for you to start that conversational relationship. And when we look to Google have got an acronym. It is EEAT. So it would be pronounced EAT. That's how it's mentioned in marketing terms. And it's an acronym. And it means experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. EEAT. And if you go and Google that, you'll find it and you'll see it. And that's what we're doing. We're building that. If we're writing regular blog posts, we're showing Google that we have experience, that we have expertise in a certain area, that we are an authority, and that we are trustworthy by putting that information out there. So that is one of the benefits of regular blogging, is you build up that EEAT in the eyes of Google, and eventually Google will see you as an authority in that particular topic or niche, and that gets you higher up in the rankings. And of course, this is all about building a relationship. When a client goes either to a directory site, or they have a referral and they go and look at your website or something like that, they're usually starting a conversation. Now, the client may not think they're starting a conversation, but if they go online and they go, I'm struggling with presentation X, they're starting a conversation, and they get a reply, which is the search results. When they click on your site and they're reading your blog page, that article that you've written about that specific topic, you're having a conversation with them. And part of that conversation might be to invite them to take the next step, which might be to reach out to you, maybe to have an introductory free session, or whatever your business plan is within your practice. But it's starting that conversation, and that starts the building of a relationship. And if you think about it, that's what counseling is all based on. It's based on the quality of that relationship. We can think often that the relationship starts the moment that we speak to the client, or the moment the client sits down and they're in a paid session, but it doesn't. It starts so much earlier than that. It's all of the correspondence, everything that they read, our website, any documentation we might send to that client. It's all part of that relationship building. And you mentioned the magical words right at the top of this, Rory, and that's that know, like, and trust. Every one of these, every step along this process is another drop in the bucket to that know, like, and trust. And of course, Rory, you can tell us more about this, gives you that opportunity to highlight your specialisms and your niche interests and your training that you've undertaken, Rory, within counselling and psychotherapy.
Absolutely. And I'll give you one reflection from my time in private practice. I had as many loved ones contact me saying that they're looking for help for their loved ones, so I had mums, dads, I had, partners who were saying my partner's, struggling with this. I had as many people who were kind of looking to get help for loved ones as I did people who were contacting me directly and say, I need help. And I think part of that is that if you're highlighting what you specialize in or what your CPD's in, people are going to be drawn to that. So say, for instance, you specialize in areas of such as trauma, anxiety, could be couples counseling. You may be a couples counselor. You may be someone who works with people whose first language isn't English. We have a very rich population now in the UK. Sometimes people's first language isn't English. If you are blogging about specializations, what's going to happen is that people are going to be looking for those specializations and say, this is a person who can help. And if it's a client, they may say, yes, this is a really good fit for me, because this is someone who not only kind of understands what I'm going through, but also it has the skill set to be able to help me. So it's a little bit like, I don't want to be too kind of surface about this, but having empathy within your blog and showing that you understand the client's frame of reference, or the loved one's relatives' frame of reference, can be very helpful, because people say, look, this person can help. And I've helped many people, or helped them to help themselves, who've come to me because a relative or a loved one or a friend has searched me up on the internet and said, I think this person can help. And it also brings networking opportunities. Having a blog isn't always about just attracting clients. It's also about building your wider network. And if you've got a blog and you're sharing information, maybe on a specialism or maybe on some parts of your practice, obviously you're not going to share confidential information, we won't be doing that, but you can share information about how you practice. It may be online and telephone. You may be an online and telephone counsellor, or you may have a niche within that. You may do asynchronous counselling, where you're doing text-based counselling, or you're doing email counselling. If you're writing about that, another practitioner who's got maybe a different approach or lots of different knowledge may read that and go, I'm going to reach out and speak to that person, because I think there's some areas there that we could collaborate in. So it can help develop your practice. And one of the things that I've become to realise over the years is that I probably learned more from my peers who've reached out and said, "Hey, Rory, you're doing this, but have you thought about this?" than I have actually through formal CPD and training. Because what's happening is when your peers reach out, they're actually working in that area and they're doing their own research. So it can be quite a powerful way of developing your own kind of professional formation. And I also think, and Ken will probably speak to this, writing can be quite cathartic. It can be a process where you can put your own emotions on paper, and it helps personal reflection and growth, I think.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and we only need to look to journaling to see how beneficial writing can be. And it gives us perhaps a fresh approach or a new look at the topic that we specialize in, the topic that we want to write about. When we kind of write that down and you see the words reflected back to you when you read it out loud and listen how that sounds for you. And of course, there is growth within that. And, you know, you were speaking about the networking opportunities, Rory, and one of the words you used there was a big key for me, and it's the word sharing. You know, there's often a debate, and we see this in our Facebook group of Counselling Tutor, where there is that question: is it ethical to kind of put your services online in social media? Can I put, hello, I'm a counsellor and I work with this? And, you know, it might be a bit sticky to do that. And I'm not saying don't do it, but what works really well is if you have a blog post about I'm just going to take a topic, for example, here. You might write about counselling for gaming addiction. You know, that you can share freely. You can share it really freely, and those that are interested might be drawn to that. People might share that wider, and it's rather than hey, I'm a counsellor and I work with people and I'm looking for clients. By specializing in those areas, those niche areas, and getting it out there, they are more shareable. And of course, maybe when that's clicked on, the traffic comes back to your website, they're on your website, and here we are again, building that know, like, and trust within that area, the area that is your specialized niche. Now, we've got a 8 compelling reasons handout that you can get for starting a blog. And you can get that by going to counsellingtutor.com. That is our website. Click on the podcast tab. Click episode number 294. You'll see that from the podcast tab, and you can download 8 compelling reasons for counselors to start a blogging. It speaks about that establishing authority, enhancing the visibility, educating and empowering your clients, building those relationships, offering support beyond the sessions, highlighting specialisms and networking opportunities, and of course that we closed on now, that personal reflection and growth. And I think this is a great topic, Rory, but for me it's bringing up a question.
Go on then.
These are all the
Ken.
great reasons for blogging. I think we need another podcast, maybe next week even, where we talk about how do you blog then? How do you set it out? What is there a blueprint for writing a blog? You know, I can just imagine now, maybe you're listening to this and you go, oh, you know, yeah, that's a great idea. I'd like to do that, but you don't know where to start. Where do you start? How do you lay it out? Maybe we speak about how a blog is put together, Rory.
Yes, I think that would be really, really helpful, because it is a bit like a formula. It's a bit like using a cookbook. You've got the idea, you've got the finished product, if you like, that Ken and myself have talked about. But how do you construct it? And more to the point, where do you post it? Where does it live to get the maximum impact? So I think it's going to be a topic we're going to be visiting, Ken.
Yeah, and perhaps we can even reach out and bring in an expert on this topic. I've got somebody in mind as we're having this discussion, Rory. That's why I love these topics, because you speak about blogging and networking. We speak about a topic and I go, ooh, hold on, I know someone who has a special interest in that area there. But that is today's ethical, sustainable practice. We really, really hope that these are of service to you, where we're looking at the ethical side of running a practice, but the sustainability as well. You know, we need to be able to pay our bills and work freely without having to worry about money, so that we can be there in service of our clients. So stand by for a future episode where we're going to talk about the how of blogging. And that will bring us now beautifully onto Practice Matters. It's the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor podcast. This is the bit that you can put down on your CPD tracker, because we bring in the experts to speak about topics that hold real interest and apply to us in our therapy, or at least give us ideas of where we might go, where we might train, where we might put our attention. And we're talking about mindful moves here, harnessing the power of REBT and exercise. And you, Rory, you held an interview with Ruth Hill on this very topic.
Yes, I did. And it's always a pleasure to interview colleagues who are using the world of counselling and psychotherapy and kind of meshing it with another piece of work that promotes health and well-being. I caught up with Ruth Hill, who spoke about the power of REBT and exercise, and this is what she had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
I'm delighted to have a guest who appeared on episode 253 of the Counselling Tutor podcast, talking about rational emotive behavioural therapy. Today, our guest talks about using REBT and exercise. So it's my great pleasure to re-interview and to speak to Ruth Hill. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Rory. Thank you for having me.
So I think this is an interesting perspective on REBT and exercise. So I guess my first question is, and it might seem a very obvious question, but I think it's a question to ask: why is exercise important?
Exercise is important for two reasons. One is that people who don't exercise are in danger of illnesses like type 2 diabetes or coronary heart disease. And the other part is exercise can make significant contributions in reducing anxiety and depression.
Yes, I think probably we all knew that, but I think it's worth reiterating that exercise is the important part of being a human being, to keep, if you can, to keep moving, to keep the body in movement and to stay healthy. So I guess sometimes, to exercise, you need some form of motivation. So let's just have a look at what we mean by motivation.
What we mean by motivation, it's possibly easier to start with what we mean it isn't. I mean, if I'm sitting on the sofa, motivation isn't going to turn up and nudge me and say, get up and do some exercise. That isn't motivation. Motivation is the thing that you want. So sitting on the sofa, I really want to be able to run a 5K. I really want to be able to be strong. That's motivation. It's the thing that impels you to do the exercise. So if you don't have a goal, an idea of where you want to be, then you're not going to get any motivation. So it's an action. It's something that you need to think about, plan, and it will compel you to take the action.
So the old story, without a goal, you can't score, would be very true. Would be very true in this. So I guess that this is an interesting application of a therapeutic modality to help with exercise. So how would REBT help someone who is struggling to exercise? How would that be helpful?
Well, REBT is helpful in the way that it looks for unhealthy beliefs, which can trigger uncomfortable, unpleasant emotions. So somebody might have some unrealistic or unhelpful beliefs or assumptions about exercise. So the gym must be less than 30% full for me to go. Now, REBT would tease out that belief and would say, well, you can't. you can't assume that will happen in reality. It's unrealistic. So we would create a healthy preference. So I'd prefer the gym to be under 30% full, but I accept it might not be. So it's getting rid of that need for certainty and replacing it with, no, it might not happen that way, and I'll still be okay with it.
Yes, it's about putting in more realistic views. I mean, from my own experience, one of the things I remember saying to someone is, I don't like running. I used to do a little bit of running, not anything spectacular, but I used to run a few 5Ks in my younger days. And I remember saying to someone who was a runner, the trouble is that when I run, I might get out of breath, and it just doesn't feel very good. And his response to me was, "Well, I run. Where do you get the idea that running is going to be not strenuous exercise?"
It's a good point, and there can be a problem there if somebody is frightened of that breathless feeling.
Yes,
there's if you look at the physical manifestations of excitement and the physical manifestations of anxiety, they're very close to raised heart rate, raised blood pressure, raised temperature, maybe sweating of the palms. So if you just describe the symptoms, is the person feeling excitement or are they feeling anxiety? So when I first realized how important this link was when I was working in a gym as a PT. I was working with an individual on the treadmill, and it was their first time. And as they were building up more speed, they were getting warmer and they were starting to sweat, and their heart rate was increasing. They'd never exercised before, but they had anxiety attacks. So immediately they assumed they were having an anxiety attack because that was what they had experienced. So it was explaining, this is what's happening. Your muscles are working. They need more oxygen. That's why your heart rate's gone up. That's why your breathing has gone up. And just talking them through the experience. So if your only experience of the, say, symptoms of exercise are through an anxiety attack, then exercise is going to be the most scary thing and you're going to avoid it.
Yes. And I guess for a lot of people, their experience of school may be, certainly people in my generation, may have a very negative experience of the school exercise regime, PT as it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the brain is very helpful. It tags things for us. And if your experience of exercise is, this is painful, this is people are laughing at me, the next time you think your schema of exercise, painful, laughing at me, are going to pop up. So there's a lot of work to go through to disconnect those, to explain. And I'm just sitting here thinking, what would be more useful? Would it be a therapy session, or would it be getting someone in the gym and talking through? These feelings are normal. We can start to disconnect the painful and disconnect the being laughed at.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure there must be a model of REBT and exercise where a personal trainer would use REBT. I mean, I've had a personal trainer in the past, and they have done much the same thing. You know, they've one of the things they said to me is, why are you rushing through the exercises?
Yeah.
And I had a long think about it, and I thought the reason was because I hated it at school so much, just wanted it to be over. And his response was, and I had to give him credit for this. He said, "You're not at school anymore, are you?"
I guess there you go. There's your REBT.
Yeah.
It's pure CBT, which is change your thinking. Is this thought helpful? Have you checked that this is accurate?
Yes.
Pure REBT. What are your beliefs about this? Can we change an unhealthy belief and turn it into a healthy one? So yeah, maybe there is scope for I did 7 weeks of PT training, and I'm sure a day could have been tagged on. This is how your client might feel emotionally about exercise, because it's your own body. you've decided to look after your body.
Yes.
That's a big deal, and there might be emotions connected to that.
And I guess people conflate in exercise with being an athlete. So one of the things I've heard is, oh well, I'd like to do a bit more. I'd like to do some jogging, but I'd never be and name any top athlete. And there's a piece of work there, I guess, about explaining that the two things are very different. They're connected, but they're very different.
Absolutely, because what the client is looking for there is as perfectionism. If I can't do it this way, I'm not doing it at all.
Yes.
So the underlying belief is probably along the lines of, well, I'm not really good enough to do that. And I think any of the therapeutic modalities would have something useful to say about that.
Yes. Yeah, but I guess it's almost saying, well, actually, explaining that they are two different things. I was struck. I was driving home the other week, and I noticed a running group, and it was only when I got sort of near to them, what someone had the top on with lead runner, and I thought I wouldn't have known that was a running group had I not seen the lead runner, because they weren't running very fast. Everybody was all different shapes and sizes. And I guess because I was tied up with driving and all the other things, I guess I'd mistakenly hooked up running with what you see on athletic tracks. Yeah, they were just ordinary folk trying to get a bit fitter, doing it at their own pace.
And that's what REBT is very helpful for, is just checking, have you made an incorrect assumption about how the world works? Because the idea with REBT is to teach the client how to use REBT themselves. And I say it's a bit like learning a foreign language. At the very beginning, you learn a couple of phrases and a little bit of syntax, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And you practice and practice, and then one day you find yourself speaking a fluent sentence. It's the same thing. It can take session upon session to go through it the first time. But you're hoping one day the client gets in touch and says, I did it without breaking stride.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes a naturally adopted attitude and naturally adopted behaviour. And I think it's really interesting because certainly I've had clients in the past who've talked about living a more healthy lifestyle, about maybe taking some exercise. And it's interesting, the stories are almost all the same about historic attitudes about who they were and a bit how they could achieve, also about school experience, and a very kind of fantasist view of what someone who did that sport looked like.
Yes, yeah, and it's teasing that apart. And one of the things that I also bring into work a lot, because I think it's so useful, is I do a bit of work on values. I excuse me bringing the worksheets into this, but I have a whole worksheet on what do you like? What were you doing when you felt that you were really being you? All of these questions about what are your values? And I think if you know your values and you can live by them, then it's easier to accept the stuff that went on, that, I didn't like that, but that was in the past and I can't change that.
Yes.
What I can do is accept who I am now.
Yeah.
What do I like? What do I want? I want to go running. By the time you got to that point, the horrible experience in school is way in the past. You've disconnected it.
Absolutely. And, I was having a bit of an REBT experience the other week. I went into Manchester, and I came back. And Manchester's a fairly sized city. Walked around. I came back. My wife said to me, "Oh, you need to do some exercise. You need to go out for a walk." So I said, "Okay, I got out for a walk." And she said, "What have you been doing today?" I said, "Oh, I was just shopping." Actually, I was exercising, because when I looked at my pedometer, we all live in our technology now, I'd actually done thousands of steps. So I hadn't connected the fact that just walking around the shops at a reasonable pace equals exercise. It's still exercise.
There was a very interesting piece of research done where two groups of women who worked as cleaners one of the groups weren't told anything special about the work they were doing. They were just, you're part of this, we're just monitoring what you do. And the second group were told everything you do, any physical activity counts as exercise. Which group lost a little bit of weight?
I think the latter.
Yeah, because they thought they were doing exercise, and it makes you move differently.
Yes.
And you're slightly aware that, I'm exercising. So it encourages you to maybe eat differently, maybe move a little bit more.
Yeah.
So walking is the gold standard. Everything else is sort of there to support good, brisk walking. So if you can say, well, I'm not just walking 30 minutes to the shops, I'm exercising.
Yes. Yeah, so changing vocabulary. So that's an important part in REBT, isn't it? I think, or should I ask the question to you? Is it an important thing in REBT that the use of vocabulary can be behaviour changing?
Absolutely. We talk about positive self-talk and how profoundly that can change the way that you view yourself, the way you view your life. But one of the things we do point out a lot is the shoulds and the musts and the have-tos. And I should have done that, I should have gone for an extra walk. Wait, are you saying that you've got an unhealthy, rigid demand here? I should have gone for a walk, and because I didn't, it means something. Or is there a healthy preference? And I do this. I stop clients all the time and go, which is the demand? What are you saying? Are you, well, not all the time. What are you saying here?
Yes.
Listen to what you're saying, because you're telling yourself, if I don't do this, it's unbearable. That's quite a hefty thing to say.
Yes. Yes, it's the Karen Horney tyranny of shoulds. That idea that we're punished by what we believe we should do. I mean, I'm quite interested in the vocabulary of motivation. Because I have we live in a very hilly area here in Moseley, and I have a little 3.5-year-old granddaughter, and we never talk to her about going up a hill. We always go over a hill.
It's the same thing, and that's in REBT. The thing hasn't changed. The hill hasn't. It's what Albert Ellis was influenced by Epictetus, who said, "We're not disturbed by things. We're disturbed by our beliefs about those things."
Yes. Yes.
So the thing doesn't change. The power that we have, the control that we have, is our response to those things.
Yes. Yes, and that is in fact a foundation of REBT, isn't it? You know, the Stoic philosophers. You know, he also quoted Marcus Aurelius, didn't he, as well? And I think it could be very, very useful. I think it goes to show how therapeutic interventions can be used very specifically with very specific client cohorts and very specific client desires. I want to exercise more. They go to an REBT therapist, and what you've outlined would be very, very helpful. Really would be helpful.
It would be, but REBT is especially good at integrative work. So we find out why there's a problem exercising, how we can help, how we can start to build things. But the belief won't have popped out of thin air. So the integrative work in REBT is to maybe use some compassion-focused therapy or some schema therapy to say, where could this possibly have come from? Your quite rigid views on, well, if you're running, you have to be an athlete. They're not causing you much disturbance, just a little bit of extra thought. But imagine if they were, and they were stopping you running.
Yes.
Then maybe we would start looking at, well, okay, what actually happened when you first learned about what running is, what athletics is? Where did the belief come from? Because you weren't born with it.
Yes, I think that's really, really interesting. And I remember when I taught REBT at a comparative level to the meta model I'm trained in. One of the things we look at is, of course, Ellis's sheet, and that could be quite difficult for some. You know, one of them, of course, which is I must be loved and liked by everybody. And I had students who said, "Well, I don't think this is irrational, really." And
that is the key. A lot of the demands aren't based. That's where it sort of put your irrational into the right place, because the demands might not be based on something that technically isn't irrational. So who doesn't want to be liked by everyone? Who doesn't want to be accepted and understood? That isn't the choice. That's the thing. That's the unchanging thing. The choice is I have to be liked and accepted by everyone. Otherwise, and then there are the problems where the preference is I would prefer to be liked and accepted by everyone. However, I accept I might not be. Yeah. That's the rational part of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Now, as we progress through this conversation, just a little bit about REBT and pain. I know that, you know, one of the areas of your work is work with people with, you know, ongoing pain, enduring pain, and using REBT. Speak a little bit about that.
There is evidence that, again, more research, groups of athletes who had very similar injuries. The group of athletes that did goal setting, had positive self-talk and healing imagery, they healed more quickly. So that's enough of a grain of, well, there's something there to start working on. And a lot of pain management, it's pure CBT in, are you doing some rigid thinking here that, well, this means I'm never going to be able to exercise again? Well, it might not mean that. It might mean you have to exercise differently. It might heal. So that's the CBT side of it. And then there is the REBT side, which is, are you demanding that you don't have this pain? Because that's not the option. And acceptance can feel very uncomfortable there, because it can feel as if you're approving. You want this pain. No, it's you accept at this moment you've got this pain. And I think that the acceptance can, if you're holding your muscles so tense because of the frustration of having the pain and of not wanting to have it, well, once you accept that you've got it, there is a release there.
Yeah, it is a fascinating, our conversation's been a fascinating walk into how a model of therapy, REBT, rational emotional behavioural therapy, can be used in the more physical aspects of someone's life, as well as the emotional, but the more physical aspects. And certainly I've found the idea of motivation and how we use vocabulary and how we think, how that impacts on the body. So it goes for me to say, Ruth Hill, thank you so much for joining us again.
Massive thank you to Ruth Hill and to you, Rory, for reaching out, holding these important discussions, bringing us the continuing professional development from experts working, actively applying this in the field. So that was Practice Matters. I hope that you took something away from that. And we now go on to Student Services. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counselingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your counselling tutor discount. That's counselingskillsacademy.com. Student services, I love, Rory, because it's where we acknowledge the future of counselling, really. You know, you're studying, you're doing your formal studies to become a counsellor or a psychotherapist. You are the future of counselling. And we love talking about the topics from back in the day when you and I stood side by side, Rory, tutoring, counselling, and we often delve into the bag of the topics where there was some maybe resistance for certain students, and therapy to practice is always one. And you're going to be asked to write therapy to practice in your assignments. You know, you're going to be there maybe doing placements, maybe recording, and then you're going to have to link that back to the theories that you learned. So theory to practice, Rory, where do we even start?
Well, I mean, yes. The reason I'm chuckling, Ken, is that when I set this topic for the podcast today, my mind wandered back to when I started my counselling training, and I turned up at my supervisor's office with my Means and Thorn Counselling in Action book, and it was a very thin tome then. It was literally like a novel. It's quite a big book now, and it was full of post-it notes. And I came in, and my supervisor said, "Right, you tell me, we had a bit of a conversation. Tell me about the client." And I started to look in my book with my post-it notes. She took the book off me. She said to me, what are you doing, Roy? I said, well, I'm just looking at this theory here, and I've got this post-it note, and the client's displaying this. And she said, can I just stop you there? And she said, hand me the book. She took it off me, and she put it on the table, and she said, right, Rory, let's not consider the book too much. Just tell me about this client. And I think, as you said at the top of this piece, Ken, it is a bit of a learning curve not to see clients as a piece of walking theory, a piece of person-centered theory on two legs. It's about how do you apply the theory while keeping a therapeutic relationship and a relationship in general with another human being. And I think the first piece of advice that I was offered as a novice therapist was, maybe it's about leaving some of the theory at the door and just working with the client. And then at the end of the session, reflecting on what themes the client brought that would link to therapy. So I think sometimes we have to think not in the minutiae of what clients are saying, but the general theme of their difficulties and how that might link to theory. And I think that was mighty helpful. She did give me the book back, I have to say, at the end. And I never took it in again, Ken.
Yeah. This topic is an interesting one. So here's the thing. What tends to happen when you're writing about theory to practice is the theory is there. It becomes like in the United Kingdom, we have a suite called Rock, and it's got printing that runs right down the middle of it. It doesn't matter where you break it, that writing is still there. And it's almost like the counselling theory. It becomes drilled into us. Certainly by the time you get to level 4, whatever your base modality is, you're going to know that theory because you're going to have written assignments on it and passed those assignments. But it becomes tricky when we're asked to look for where the theory applies in the practice. And what it can lead to, and this is where we leave the theory at the door or the book at the door, is not being 100% present with the client in the room. And even if that's a simulated session that you're doing with a peer and you're thinking, okay, this session is going to be evaluated. I'm going to have to write about how I've applied the theory here. Right, let me think, where am I going to look at, almost waiting for an opportunity to dive in and bring in a little bit of the theory. You don't have to do that. Just be you. Just be in your skills. It will naturally, the theory is going to weave its way into your session. The trick here is being able to dissect it afterwards and pull out that theory. And what's really interesting is if you're working with a peer, is you can leave a session. I've seen this happen so many times, including experiencing it myself. I might come out of a simulated session and go, I'm really struggling to find any theory that I can link up there. And the peer that I might be working with or somebody that might be observing could then go and say, but you hit this and you hit this and you hit this and you hit this. And then when I hear it, I go, oh, right, yes. Oh, right, of course, yes. I overlooked that. We can be too close to the trees. What's it? You can't see the forest for the trees, Rory, I believe is the saying.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, as we say, my part of the world, you can't see the wood for the trees.
There it is. Can't see the wood for the trees. So
wood for the trees.
A great way to practice this is in triads when you are the observer. If you're the observer, you get to watch the session and you get to watch the theory play out, and you can write it down when somebody else is working, and it kind of trains you to be able to pick the theory out of skill sessions or when you're kind of looking over those as well. If you have the permission to do so and you follow the correct data protection guidelines of your country, and you were able to record a session, that is also very, very beneficial to be able to listen back to that and look for the theory within that. If that is a simulated session with a peer and you can get their permission to do so, you may even choose to share that with your supervisor and get some guidance and help in how you untangle the theory from the skills, because it is there. You've got the theory there. It's just about being able to see it. And within the moment, when you're there with the client, you're fully present and you're in their frame of reference, you're not thinking theory top of mind. It is something that is done post the session. When you're in that session, you're using your skills, your empathy, and being with that person as they go through their journey. Very rarely, Rory, in all of my counselling career, did I ever sit there going, now I wonder which one of Carl Rogers' 19 propositions this presentation would relate to. It just doesn't happen. But you can do it post the session when you're kind of going over it. And I guess this keys into the importance of process notes. So you will have your notes that you write about your client, who they were and how they presented. But your process notes are yours. And you get to kind of put in those what is important to you. And it may be that you sit and you go over it, and all you do in your process notes is write the theory that you believe links to the session you just had with that client. That's another exercise for linking theory to practice, Rory.
Yes, absolutely. And, as Ken said, if you're thinking of recording actual clients, please check with your training providers. Training providers, some training providers don't allow you to do that. Some placements don't allow you to do that, and there's a lot of thought that has to go into that. But getting back to the theory emerging, I think that sometimes one has to wait, because how the theory emerges, it has is a direct correlation with how deep the therapeutic relationship is and how trusting the client is of you. Initially, in initial sessions, clients will talk about very surface material. And the reason for that is they're protecting themselves. Not all clients, some might go straight into what's wrong with them or what's going on for them. But in my experience, clients tend to come in and they're kind of testing the water a bit. They're sharing very personal information, things that are very difficult that they can't maybe speak to anybody else, can't speak to the families about. So there may be a process of a client coming in, and you get to the end of the session and you think, oh, it's a bit thin. There's nothing really I can pick up on here. And the reason for that is that there isn't anything emerged yet. And it's in the arc of therapy that we get these emerging themes where clients speak about what's really going on for them. And at that point, as Ken said, when you're journaling or you're doing your process notes at the end, or maybe if you're in supervision, or maybe if you're just giving feedback in the class, you go, yes, that makes sense in terms of the theory. It's not really a case of trying to leverage the theory into the client. It's more a process of saying, that's what the client's presenting. Is there any themes that are coming up that are linking to the theory that I'm learning? So you're working more with themes than actual pieces of information, if that makes any sense. So I'll give you an example. A client may be saying, well, I've got quite a big family, and they all like going skiing. They're big skiing people. We go on the ski slope, I prefer to sit in a library and read a book, but I've been told I've got to go skiing. Now, on the face of it, it doesn't seem there's a lot there, but in terms of person-centered, you could say, well, there's a theme there of an introjected value, someone having to do something, and they're not being their true, authentic self. It doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering, I don't think. You can sometimes just pick up through the arc of the conversation with the client little bits about their lives that just kind of emerge into the theory.
You know, Rory, I reckon if we really focused on it, we could probably do at least 10 minutes of theory just on what you said there and picking out some theory. So, I mean, if you were working in a person-centered modality, and I'm going to that because that is my training modality, so I know it well enough to speak about it, there would need to be psychological contact for that person to be sharing the fact that their family goes skiing and they don't. You've already mentioned, Rory, the interjected value. Is there a level of incongruence within them? Do they feel a pull to go to the theory can just start piling in when you look at it. So it's about really knowing your theory, looking over it, and being open to kind of bringing those theories in. I guess if you are on and I'm going to person centered, I know there's other modalities, and I'm just going there because it's my base as I share. If you're a person centered trainee and you're needing to write about that theory, you've always got your 6 necessary and sufficient conditions to, no matter what happens in the session, you're going to be able to weave that in there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if someone came to you and said, you may be doing a more transactional analysis type of theory, and they're saying, I'm always, embarking on exercise, and it's never works out, and I'm always doing, I'm doing rock climbing and I'm doing all this. You might, as a TA therapist, start to kind of go into their past and the messages they got as children, because, transactional analysis is all about that movement from childhood to adulthood. And you might find that the script that they've been given was you always had to do dangerous activities. Exercise always had to be of a dangerous and exciting type, as opposed to, exercise could be walking down the street. And it's amazing how childhood experiences, the theory of childhood experiences, so we're talking the theory here being script analysis, can impact on the adult life. So there's plenty to go at. I think it's just a case of just letting it emerge. And you could do that in supervision by talking about your client and what's going on. And a good supervisor, certainly if you're a student, will be in that formative mindset of helping you link theory to practice, information, the teaching mindset within supervision. And I guess if you're in your class, then your tutor might pick that up. And also it could be that if you're in a triad, as Ken said, the observer picks it up and says, oh, that's quite interesting, because what came up there was ABC. So I've just referenced REBT there, subconsciously, Ken. Action, belief, and consequence.
I think what we should do, Rory, is listen back to this podcast episode 294 and pull out all the theory of what we're saying. This has been episode 294 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We're so grateful that you joined us.
Yes, we started off with ethical, sustainable practice, and we talked about right to thrive, using blogging to inform and maybe to invite clients to come and contact you. And as Ken said, we're going to be continuing this conversation, not just the what it is, but the how to do it in a future episode. In Practice Matters, Mindful Moves, we talked about exercise trainer and REBT therapist Ruth Hill, and she talks about her experiences of motivating people in exercising using REBT. And then finally, Ken and myself had a wonderful meander through the therapeutic environment, linking theory to practice, bridging theory to practice. And as we come to the end of this podcast, as we part ways, I've got 2 very small but heartfelt requests for you. If our conversation today was helpful, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform. It's a simple way to support and help our community grow. And hey, me and Ken love a positive review. And also, if you know someone who might appreciate today's episode, pop it on your social media, share it with them, share it on their timelines. It could make a difference, and it could help them develop their practice. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your journey. Really, we enjoy you, the listener, coming along with me and Ken, having a chat, being part of your journey. We're really grateful that you tune in. So next time, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.